Hi, welcome to Module 6, Developing Test Items. In this lecture, we will together discuss definitions of test items, analyze the general guidelines for most test items with examples to illustrate. Some types of items, like multiple choice or true-false items, are relatively easy to identify because they are the individual test questions that anyone can recognize as discrete units. An item may prove more difficult to identify for the more integrative types of language tests, such as dictations, interviews, role plays, and compositions, or for more personal assessments like conferences, self-assessments, or portfolios. Brown 1996 defines the term item very broadly as the smallest unit that produces distinctive and meaningful information or feedback on a test when it is scored or rated. This definition will be general enough to work for every type of language test from multiple choice to portfolio, yet will be specific enough to also prove useful. Since the item is the basic unit in testing, one way to improve a test is to examine the individual items and revise the test so that only those items that are performing well remain in the revised version of the test. Teachers often look at the total scores of their students on a test, but careful examination of the individual items that contributed to the total scores can also prove very illuminating. This process of carefully inspecting individual test items is called item analysis. In the scale of classroom testing, item analysis discussed in this lecture is simply to investigate how well the items on the test are working with a particular group of students. Item analysis can take numerous forms, but when testing for norm-referenced purposes, there are three types of analysis that are typically applied: item format analysis, item facility analysis, and item discrimination analysis. In analyzing item format, testers focus on the degree to which each item is properly written so that it measures all and only the desired content. Such analysis often involve making judgments about the adequacy of item formats. Consider the following multiple-choice grammar item. The apple is located somewhere on or around A. A table, B. An table, C. The table, D. Table. This item has two possible answers, A and C, is wordier than it needs to be, and repeats the word table inefficiently. Item format analysis could lead us to correct these problems and produce a better item as follows. Do you see the chair and table? The apple is on table. A. B. The. C. An. And D. No article. Now, the first sentence makes the only correct answer. The item has been reworded to avoid difficult, distracting words, and the word table is removed up into the main part of the item, so it is not repeated 4 times in the A to D options. The guidelines provided here are designed to help teachers make well-informed and relatively objective judgments about how well items are formatted. The first set of guidelines is a very general set that teachers can apply to virtually all types of items. A second set will help guide teachers to analyze receptive response item formats, true, false, multiple choice, and matching items. A third set will aid with the different types of productive response item formats: fill-in, short response, and task. And a fourth set will aid teachers in formatting personal response item formats: conferences, portfolios, self-assessments. In all cases, the purpose is to help teachers improve the formatting of the items that they use in their language test. Table 3.1 shows some general guidelines which are applicable to most language testing formats. Let's consider each question in the table. Is the item format correctly matched to the purpose and content of the item? Teachers will, of course, want their item formats to match the purpose and content of the item. In part, this means matching the right type of item to what is being tested in terms of modes, known as productive or receptive, and channels, which are written or oral language. For instance, teachers may want to avoid using a multiple-choice format, which is basically receptive mode. Students read and select, but produce nothing. For testing productive skills like writing and speaking. Similarly, it would make little sense to require the students to read aloud the individual letters of the words in a book in order to test the receptive skill of reading comprehension. Such a task would be senseless, in part because the students would be using both receptive and productive modes mixed with both oral and written channels when the purpose of the test, reading comprehension, is essentially receptive mode and written channel. A second problem would arise because the students would be too narrowly focused in terms of content on reading the letters of the words. To avoid mixing modes and channels and to focus the content at the comprehension level of the reading skill, teachers might more profitably have the students read a written passage and use receptive response items in the form of multiple-choice comprehension questions. In short, teachers must think about what they are trying to test and try to match their purpose with the item format that most closely resembles it. To sum up, two main points have been discussed in this video. First, definition of test items. Second, general guidelines to develop a test item. We'll continue talking about how to develop a good test item in the next videos.
Hello, and today we're focusing on multi-choice questions. Multi-choice questions are something that teachers are likely to use in the classroom themselves and also to make for themselves to use in the classroom. So that's why the goal of today's video is that you will understand why it's not easy to make a good multi-choice test. But I want to begin by getting you to practice a multi-choice test. So it's a text about life in the Pacific Islands. So this beautiful backdrop I've got around us here is actually in Fiji, which is in the Pacific. So you've got the wonderful coconut palms, the sunset, the beautiful sea, which you can't really see because it's sunset. And of course, this could be many parts of the world. It could be the coastline of Vietnam or the Philippines or Thailand or Madagascar in Africa. But this is, in fact, the Pacific Islands. And I want you to answer some questions about life in the Pacific Islands. So on the next 4 screens, there are going to be some multi-choice questions. And I'm going to just be quiet and let you write down the answer to these questions. We'll do it quickly. So here goes. Okay, so those questions came from this book. It's a book of speed readings, and I hope you had time to read those questions and to write down an answer. I guess you could always pause the video if it was going too quickly. So let's look at your answers. Here are the answers to those questions. Mark your own work and see what you got. Okay, so I wonder, what did you get? Now, of course, I'm not going to know what you got, but let me tell you, this is something I do with my own students in the classroom from time to time. And this is what normally happens. Normally, no one gets below about 3. And some people get very high marks, 7, 8, 9. Why is this? Well, I guess the people who are getting high marks are drawing on their knowledge of the world, their knowledge of the Pacific, to guess the answer. And this alerts us to a really important issue. It's the issue of text dependency. So what this means is that you should not be able to answer the questions and get a passing mark without being able to read and understand the text first. So clearly, if people can get a passing mark without reading the text, there is an issue with the test. And this can be a case with things like multi-choice questions in particular. So let's look at what is required to make a good multi-choice test. The first thing to bear in mind is that we should use a long text or several short texts. Now, the reason for this is fairly simple. If you want to have, let's say, 10 questions, you've got a fairly short text, you're going to be struggling to make enough decent questions. You might have questions that are way, way, way too difficult or way, way, way too easy. So you need to have either one long text or a series of several short texts in order to have enough good questions. The second thing to bear in mind is you need to check your answer length and the distribution of the answers. This means 2 things. First of all, you don't want always the correct answer to be the shortest one and all the distractors to be long, or vice versa. And the other thing about distribution is interesting. I remember when I was at school, a long time ago, we were always told, if in doubt, choose C. C is almost always the right answer. And funny enough, that often tends to be true. So when you've made your multi-choice test, you must go through and just see which letters you've chosen each time as the correct answer. And you might be surprised. You might find that you have unconsciously favoured one letter much more than the others. So you need to check the distribution of the answers. It doesn't matter if A is the right answer. Don't go for C all the time. Okay, the third thing to do is to pilot the test. Now, ideally, this should be with students, but that's not always possible. If you're making it for your own class, you may not have students to pilot it with, but at least get a friend, another teacher, to have a look at the test. So the fourth thing to do to make a good multi-choice test is to analyse the student answers. You should do this whether you are going to use the test again or not. Clearly, if you're going to use the test again, you want to try and improve it each time. So by checking to see if there are questions which everybody got right, or almost everyone got wrong, you can start to change the answers to weed out questions that don't work and to make better questions. But even if you're not planning to use it again, you should analyse it for yourself. It just makes you more aware of yourself as a test maker, so that next time you make a multi-choice question, perhaps you, as the teacher, will do a better job of making the test. So we come now to thinking about the advantages of a good multi-choice test. So a good multi-choice test is easy to mark. That's an issue of practicality, but it's very easy to mark, which is great. It's also very reliable. Both of these things are really important to achieve in assessment. But always remember that a good multi-choice test is not easy to make. They are hard to make. You must put in the time to get it right before you give it to the students. Thank you.